Not every engineering idea works, like the exhaust setup on this 1936 Indian. But what does work is being a subscriber to the Audrain Museum Network. Subscribe today. Do it now. Join us. Hello and welcome to the Audrain Automobile Museum and our exhibition Air-Cooled, Keep It Simple. In our exhibition preview video, which if you haven't watch it here, we talked about the fact that air-cooled is a very simple concept, but a very complex reality. And to help explore that, I'm here with my friend David DeMuzio, the Executive Director of the Audrain Automobile Museum. And David, we're going to keep it easy. We're going to keep it simple by starting with the air-cooled portion of this exhibition. In future videos, you will find out how it gets complicated. But let's start at the very beginning, as they would say in the Sound of Music. And we have a wonderful example of an engine here. Tell us about this engine.
A wonderful little compact engine made by Audrain Bhutan. Really the first compact engine that was made in mass quantities you could buy. It was sold to over 150 bicycle manufacturers when they were moving into motorized bicycles. A 2.5 horsepower version of this is a 1.5 horsepower. 2.5 horse version of it was sold and used in many of the earliest cars, including Franklin, which we'll talk about in a minute. Generously lent to us by our friend Evan Ide. This one I think came out of a Audrain tricycle
of 1898, I believe.
Yeah. So.
And I think we've got somewhere a photo of Evan riding/driving this trike on a 50-mile tour in California, the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance, which is insane, but very Evan.
Yeah. It looks like it's missing parts, but in fact the carburetor was a separate unit as well as the coil. So you'll see that if we show the picture of the tricycle, you'll see that. So this is the essence of the engine.
And of course, we mentioned that Franklin was a pioneer in air-cooled automobiles. The first production air-cooled car was Franklin in 1902, and as you mentioned, they used the Audrain Bhutan engine. But you know, it was something that a lot of people don't realize, that a lot of manufacturers in the early days were assemblers. And so they either bought a Audrain Bhutan engine or a Benz engine, and they built their cars with other local parts. So there was nothing to be ashamed of buying a Audrain Bhutan engine. In fact, it was the class of the field.
And hundreds did it. So.
And so we move on, we leap forward, as we did in those days, to the car here in this exhibition, the oldest car in the exhibition, this 1905 Franklin. And you can already see from just 1902 to 1905, this car is now powered by a Franklin built and designed inline transversely mounted 4-cylinder engine. And it's just absolutely astonishing. And of course, the entire point, let's actually take a step back and go to Audrain Engineering 101.
Oh boy.
Okay, here we go. Engines have to be cooled because combustion produces heat. And so
quite simply, yes.
Quite simply. And so how do you get rid of the heat? And with an air-cooled engine, as you can see on this Audrain Bhutan, and also quite clearly on the 1905 Franklin, you have all of these fins. It's very much reminiscent of a motorcycle that most people have seen these on. And so adding surface area to dissipate heat is the way an air-cooled engine basically works. Yes. Now, of course, you also have to have air flowing through.
Well, and assuming you're moving forward, yes.
Assuming moving forward. One of the things, of course, that's quite funny that we think of when we look at these very old cars today, it's, wow, they have no fans. How do they get air moving? What if they're stuck in traffic? And you think, oh, right, 1905, there was no traffic. So once you started your car, you basically were moving.
Right.
So that was very helpful, and also one of the reasons why, obviously, air-cooled motors were a very good, I shouldn't say motors, I hate when people say motors, when talking about engines. So I apologize to the entire world for that. Does it drive you crazy, or is it just
does
me?
a bit.
Okay. But it's something that people chose air-cooled engines because of their simplicity. The fact you didn't have to worry about the plumbing of a radiator and what it meant, and especially you see some of the early cars, like the wonderful Panhard de Levasseur, which is in the collection, where you have this amazing serpentine creation, which is the radiator.
Simplicity and lightweight were two repeated themes when they talked about and promoted these engines in cars. Yeah.
And it's one of the things, we joked about this right before we started rolling the cameras, that I said, you know, it's wonderful too, looking under the hood of this Franklin and seeing the position of this engine. Now, it's very well back in the engine compartment, largely because there were actually batteries that went in front of it, which were no longer needed once it was switched to a magneto system. But nevertheless, through that air opening in the front of the hood, you get a good amount of air flowing through into the engine compartment. And then where does it go?
Right into the wooden firewall.
Right into the wooden firewall, exactly. But again, thinking about the, and we'll come back to this, about heat and its dissipation and why air-cooled got slightly more complicated as we moved on. The fact that these engines actually didn't create that much heat.
Correct.
Because the compression is very low, and so there's not a lot of, there's a minimal amount of friction going on compared to a modern car.
That's right.
And things progressed very quickly, and we have a really marvelous car here in the exhibition, something which I know no one has seen because I'd never seen one before. Yeah. This Cameron, which is a New England car. They built them in Rhode Island and then also in Massachusetts as well.
And New London, Connecticut as well. So yeah, the company had a history of moving around quite a bit, which is interesting in itself. But this four-cylinder Model 9 was in production certainly by 1908, somewhere earlier, 1908 to 1912, and they moved on to a six-cylinder. But you know, made in southern New England, and did quite well for a short period of time, and then went bankrupt. But it's another great example, and really competed literally with the Franklin. And I'm sure they were looking at the Franklin carefully as they designed and built the Cameron. All these manufacturers were trying to promote the performance of their car. This one was the first American car to make it up Mount Washington hill climb without having to stop because of overheating. So that's a testament, and maybe it's because of the fan, I don't know, but you know, the engine did well. It was simple, very dependable, did its job.
And that, by the way, is an astonishing feat. If any of you ever have the opportunity to actually drive up Mount Washington today in a modern car, it's almost inconceivable to think that people drove up Mount Washington, and especially without stopping, in a car of this era. That's astonishing. That is a great accomplishment indeed.
Epic.
Yes.
Epic. Yes.
And one of the characteristics of this car, as I look at it, it's quite funny. You and I both are dog companions, and we have small dogs, and this looks nothing more than like a carry case for a medium-sized dog.
Yeah.
But again, it's also the fact that you can see everything so directly. The Cameron has a fan, so again, we're progressing to the point where we're looking at additional cooling for additional performance. This is not a small car, it's a nice four-place tourer. And it's also
20 horsepower, which is
20 horsepower, which is quite substantial for the time.
Yes.
When you think about the fact that, you know, a 24 horsepower Benz a few years before was like a world record car. So, you know, technology is just absolutely flying by. Yeah. And by the time we get to the next car we're going to talk about in this little section, it's really amazing. But before we go to the next car, let's talk about a motorcycle of the same period, an astonishing, historic American motorcycle. So while all that great pioneering was going on in the automotive world, the motorcycle world had taken the leap forward in the 1890s, and it continued through the early part of the 20th century. And this motorcycle, I have to say, and you know that I am such an avid motorcyclist. is one of the most beautiful vehicles in the collection.
Yeah, I think it might be my favorite. We have, I think, I don't know, over 100 motorcycles in the collections now. This is the earliest, 1910. But what a wonderful machine, and lots of innovation. And there's a parallel. Bicycles become motorized, bicycles become motorcycles. Sort of the same progression as cars from horse-drawn carriages to horseless carriages to automobiles. This is really an interesting story and very innovative in its day. So George Pierce had a bicycle manufacturing company in the earliest days. Of course, we know them later as Pierce or Pierce Arrow.
Pierce Arrow, yes.
Automobiles. But in 1907, he does, with his son's help, starts a motorcycle division, if you will. And the first thing his son Percy does is head to Europe for inspiration. And the bike to look at in those days was the first four-cylinder motorcycle made by FN in Belgium. He, in fact, bought one, shipped it home. They took it apart and learned as much as they could about the success of that motorcycle. And some people say, oh, well, they just copied it. No, there's actually quite a few innovations on this motorcycle that set it apart. Of course, it is the first inline, four-cylinder, air-cooled, American-made motorcycle. But it has a stressed frame or a stressed engine block, so you can see there's no frame that goes under the motor. That's a cool thing. You can see these huge down tube and top tubes, which make the frame quite stiff, but it also contains the oil and gasoline for the engine.
Amazing. I mean, these are characteristics of a modern Formula One race car.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. Shaft drive. You see pedals. That's simply to get the bike it started. Once it's going, it's shaft driven. The band brake, I'll say, is not so good. Doesn't stop very well. Going
was always more important than stopping. Everybody knows that.
Just a wonderful thing. This is 1910, so a year or two into production, they introduced a two-speed transmission. So just a wonderful thing. The poster above it has a lot of these things you talk about, all these endurance feats and why it's such a great machine. And that's fun to always hear them, how they promote these things. But what a wonderful early machine.
It's absolutely spectacular. And here on this engine as well, you can so clearly see the benefits of air cooling. You see these incredible fins. And I love this because it's an industrial object that is a piece of sculpture. Everything about this motorcycle is sculpture, but the engine itself, you could put this on a plinth in the Museum of Modern Art in New York City and light it beautifully, and you think, wow, isn't that something?
Yeah.
It is absolutely extraordinary. And when the functional is also so incredibly beautiful, and in this case, of course, in the motorcycle application, air cooling is absolutely the way to go. Who would want to ruin either the lines or the balance of this with a radiator, especially in 1910, with what radiators were like then? And
simply not needed.
No, not at all. And to give the level of performance that this gave was also quite impressive indeed. Now we're going to go back to the cars for a moment and talk about another Franklin.
Great, let's go.
So by the time we get back to Franklin here in this exhibition, in 1923, it is astonishing. This is now a car that competes with the best America has to offer. It's, oh, do you want a Packard or a Franklin? And they also took advantage of the lightweight nature of air-cooled cars, even to the point of making aluminum bodies and having a wood chassis to save weight. It's absolutely amazing, the engineering ideas that went into the Franklin.
Well, that's what makes these first 2 decades of automobile design so interesting. The amount of innovation in these 2 decades has never been produced again. And that's what makes it so interesting to see in 5 or 10 or 20 years of time, how much advancement there is in these automobiles.
It's the same today, David. I mean, we went from a 5.5-inch digital display to a 22-inch digital display.
That's impressive too, right?
There you are.
Yeah, sure.
But it's an astonishing thing to look at that 23 Franklin and just see the quality of the design. I love the fact that, again, everything new is old. We think, oh, forced air induction, oh, that's brand new. The way this 23 Franklin was cooled, despite the wonderful grill that let the air in, was with an forced induction duct that went down below the bumper and forced the air over the engine. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's really great to see. It's so beautifully made too.
And of course, we have to say that Franklin, by 1934, was out of the auto business, bankrupt. But it was not the end of the company.
No, they continued under another name to make commercial engines as well as aircraft engines. Then Preston Tucker comes along after the war and buys them up, thinking his own engine didn't do so well. So he bought these helicopter engines from air-cooled, put water-cooled jackets on them, but that's all the Tuckers essentially, except for the first few, have these wonderful rear-engine V8, originally air-cooled, now water-cooled engines in them that are made by essentially the Franklin design.
And it also points out something else, that really, while air-cooled cars were around in the pioneering days of automobiles, they found their real glory and niche in airplanes, because obviously air cooling was key. It was easy to do because the plane is in the air and flying. Plus, you did not want the added weight and complexity of water cooling in an airplane.
That's right. Yeah.
And World War I certainly proved the great value and power and flexibility of air-cooled engines in aviation, and that continued for a very long time, for decades after decades. So the final thing we're going to talk about is something which is a really fascinating story. We love technology, and we love inventive designs. And we're going to take a look at an inventive design that wasn't quite either ready for prime time or a good idea at all. And this is in another motorcycle, our 1936 Indian.
Let's go see it.
Yeah, absolutely. David, that Pierce 4 is an amazing motorcycle, but this Indian is astonishing. It's got to be, for me, one of the most visually mechanical motorcycles of the 1930s. There's a lot going on there.
A lot, and everything's exposed, so you can just stand there and stare at it and wonder all the parts. But it's also really wonderful to ride, unlike the Pierce 4.
Now, you've ridden this motorcycle.
Yes, not too far. It's left-hand throttle, left foot clutch, right-hand shift. So not anything like a modern motorcycle. So the best thing you do is you take it out to the polo field and ride around in the grass in case you drop it. But a lot of fun, and it really very engaging, as well as lots of low-end torque, wonderful sound, of course. And it's really fond for those of us in New England. It's made in Massachusetts, in Springfield, Massachusetts. So much prefer Indians over Harleys.
Oh, we have to be careful here. We're going to get all of those comments from the Harley guys.
No, we love Harley Davidsons too. No, to be fair, we love them both.
We have a Harley Davidson in the show, so fear not.
But I mean, come on, it's our local team, so to speak. So we got to love it. But it really interesting bike in the sense that Indian had been in business for a little while already. But they end up buying the Ace motorcycle company out of Philadelphia in 1927. And the strength of the Ace, really the only bike that really did well for them, was the four-cylinder. So in 1928, Indian introduces the Ace 4. And then a few years later, they come out with a new and improved version, so to speak. But this one in particular we chose for the show, 1936. They're looking for ways to improve. I mean, they did lots in terms of suspension. We don't really need to talk about that here, but they do decide to change the configuration of the head. So now they call it the upside down 4, meaning that the exhaust manifold is above the intake, where most motorcycles it's the other way around.
And they're doing this for power.
And they gain almost 10 horsepower more, okay? But what they also didn't realize, a couple of things, but one of the main concerns was overheating on the head, but also on the inseam of your leg.
Which is why I asked you how far you had ridden this motorcycle.
No, yeah, I didn't experience that, quite frankly, but apparently it was a problem, as well as the exhaust valve train needing a lot of adjustment all the time. So they only produced these for 2 years and then went back to the old design. But it makes them, you know, fairly rare, if you will. Therefore collectible. But no, it's a wonderful example of a moment in time where they were trying something new, still air-cooled, but it doesn't work out so well.
It's very interesting because they seem to have in this design taken the benefits of air cooling and then negated it by saying the air-cooled engine is designed to dissipate heat horizontally and vertically. So let's block its direction of dispersal of heat and just heat up a manifold even hotter so that you can actually burn the driver, burn the rider as he drives it. Fantastic.
So,
what a wonderful idea.
There you have it. But you know, certainly by 1939, with more suspension and motor upgrades, you know, the 39, and of course they make them right up to the war in 42, where they cease civilian production, and then after the war they don't bring them back. But the 39 is considered to be probably the height and the best performing four-cylinder Indian made. We also have a 1929 in the collection, a 4, which is one of the earlier ones. Also quite fun to ride and beautiful to look at.
Well, this is an extraordinary example of what we like to showcase here at the Audrain, which is great engineering ingenuity. Sometimes things work, sometimes they don't. This didn't, but nonetheless, it still is a great example of the art of the air-cooled motorcycle, especially from the 1930s. So,
absolutely.
Thank you all for joining us here in this highlights video of our exhibition Air-Cooled, Keep It Simple. And this exhibition runs until July 13th, 2025 here in the gallery. We'd like to welcome you here to the show on Bellevue Avenue, or to watch all of our videos here in the Audrain Museum Network, or on the Bloomberg Connect's website. So David, thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next time.